this week with a lesson in forgiveness from Steve Hartman on the road.
It all went down on this block in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Back in '05, Jamel McGee says he was minding his own business when a police officer accused him of and arrested him for dealing drugs.
You saying the officer made it up?
Yeah, it was all made up.
Of course, a lot of accused men make that claim, but not many arresting officers agree.
So you phonied the report?
I did. I falsified the report.
This is former Benton Harbor police officer Andrew Collins.
Were you just trying to chalk up an arrest?
Basically, the start of that day, I was gonna make sure I had another drug arrest.
And in the end, you put an innocent guy in jail?
Correct. Yeah.
You lost everything.
I lost everything. My only goal was to seek him when I got home and to hurt him.
Really?
That was my goal.
Eventually, that crooked cop was caught, served 1.5 years for falsifying many police reports, planting drugs, and stealing.
Of course, Jamel was exonerated, but he still spent 4 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Today, both men are back here in Benton Harbor, which is a small town. Maybe a little too small.
Hey guys, thank you.
Last year, by sheer coincidence, they both ended up at Mosaic, a faith-based employment agency where they now work side by side in the same cafe.
Oh, excuse me.
And it was in these cramped quarters that the bad cop and the wrongfully accused had no choice but to have it out.
And I said, honestly, I have no explanation. All I can do is say I'm sorry.
And Jamel says that was all it took.
That was pretty much what I needed to hear.
Today, they're not only cordial,
Saturday, we went to the trampoline park.
they're friends.
We talk about life.
Such close friends. Not long ago, Jamel actually told Andrew he loved him.
And I just started weeping because he doesn't owe me that. I don't deserve that, you know?
Did you forgive for his sake or for yours?
No, for our sake. Not just us, for our sake.
Jamel went on to tell me about his Christian faith and his hope for a kinder mankind. He wants to be an example. So now he and Andrew give speeches together about the importance of forgiveness and redemption.
Grab this, we'll set it over there.
And clearly, if these two guys from the coffee shop can set aside their bitter grounds, what's our excuse? Steve Hartman, on the road, in Benton Harbor, Michigan.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight.
To imagine for a moment that you are Jamel in this story. That you are falsely accused, that you go to prison for 4 years for a crime you did not commit. Eventually you're exonerated, but the guy who sent you to prison, the cop who falsified the reports, he only gets 1.5 years in prison. By the way, is that crazy to me or what? So you go to work one morning, and then who shows up not to buy coffee, but to get a job? The police officer who sent you to jail. If you look in your sermon notes, sermon's entitled, Worst Person Ever. Why does God allow such people in our lives? Like, God, if you are good, can't you just zap them with your mighty zapping powers? Why does God put people in our life who make our lives miserable? Who cause us such pain and such anguish, such strife? That's last week's sermon. I'm glad I knew that. Why they pull up this week's sermon, why does God allow difficult people in our lives? I'm going to pray, they're going to get that right, and then we're going to read Esther chapter 3 together. So let's bow and pray. God, we are so thankful to be in this place. Lord, we're so thankful that we could express our love to you in singing. But God, we ask that you would express your heart to us through this message. Lord, I pray that we're just not here to hear a good sermon or that I do a good job if people stay awake. But Lord, I pray that you would use these words to pierce our hearts, that, Father, it's not about understanding it, but Lord, it's about living it out. Lord, that you would have a message for us to mold and shape not just our thinking, but our way of life. Lord, that we would see struggles and that we would see hardships and we would see difficult people through your eyes, Lord. And what is your greater purpose and your greater plan? That you may get glory in all situations, especially those are hard, and especially with people who are difficult. So God, use us this day, we ask in Christ Jesus, amen. So, how do you treat the worst person ever? We're going to read through Esther chapter 3. If you got the Bible app, we're in the New King James Version. Pew Bible in front of you, it's page 286. So after these things, King Artaxerxes promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set him in the seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for the king had commanded concerning him. But Haman would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened, they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay homage to Haman, was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Artaxerxes, the people of Mordecai. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Artaxerxes, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Artaxerxes, "There is a certain people scattered, dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all the other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them to remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and the decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all people, to every province according to his script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Artaxerxes was written and sealed with the king's signet ring, and the letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the people in Shushan were perplexed. you have your bulletin, you can follow along here. First point is this conflict. So after these things, and if the ice caused you to miss last week, let me recap what those things were. There was a coup against the king. The doormen decided to overthrow and kill the king after the new queen was proclaimed. Now, the new queen was Esther, who is technically Mordecai's niece, but really he raised her like his only daughter. So Mordecai finds out about this coup, that the doormen, they want to kill the king. Now, the doormen, they have the privilege of access. So they could create the opportunity. They just didn't have the means to carry out the deed. So they're looking for help. And word gets to the ladies and gets back to Mordecai, hey, there is a legitimate attempt on the king's life. So Mordecai tells his daughter Esther, and Esther tells the king, and they make an inquiry. They see if this is true. And they find out it is true. And the two doormen, you know what happens to them? They're taken out to the court, and they're publicly executed. And the deed of Mordecai is recorded, but his actions were not rewarded. Mordecai, at this point, he's a low-level official. He governs from the outer court, but he's not in the palace. Now, promotion time comes. And you would think, who should be promoted for such a great deed? You're like, hey, how about the guy who just saved the king's life? No. A brand new character is brought onto the scene, and it is Haman, the son of Hadassah, the Agagite. And remember, Esther's written kind of like a missionary letter from China. There's certain things that can't be said because Esther's a Jew in the capital city. So again, in the book of Esther, there's not the word God, there's not prayer, but you see God's hand on every page. And when they call Haman the Agagite, it's known to all the Jewish readers of this 1,000-year conflict between the Agagites and the Jews. This is perhaps the Jews' longest and long-standing enemy throughout the Old Testament. And I want to take you about 3 minutes to walk through a little bit of history. So, if you know the story of Israel, they were slaves in Egypt, and up from Moses, he brings them up out of Egypt to the Promised Land. Nod your head if you've ever heard this. In Egypt, you see the plagues, and as they flee from Egypt, they part the Red Sea on dry land. Now, before they even get to Mount Sinai, before God gives them the Ten Commandments, the first battle with the Israelites takes place. Now, I'm going to show you a people, they're called the Amalekites. And we're going to see in a few minutes how the Amalekites become the Agagites. Just trust me, it's going to come there, but this is going to make a lot more sense if you see it. So in Exodus 17, it says, Moses says to Joshua, choose some men to go out and fight against Amalek. So they're traveling to Mount Sinai, and this people, unprovoked, comes and attacks Israel. And Moses says, tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with a rod of God in my hand. And if you know the story, this is the story when Moses' hands go like this, Israel wins. And when his hands comes down, Israel starts to lose. So much so they say, Moses, sit on down, and they get two people to stand underneath his arms, and they literally hold his arms up for the entire day, and it's to show that God is the one who really gives the victory. Because there's nothing special in going like this, right? But it's the power of God working that gives Israel the victory. So the Amalekites, they come and they attack Israel. And they were so bitter for losing that as they go out, there's this continual nuisance. That remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you're coming out of Egypt, and how they met you and attacked your rear flanks. So all the stragglers at your rear, when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. So as they're going through the desert, these Amalekites were a continual nuisance. and if you got tired or you fell behind, they were trying to pick off the Israelites one at a time. These seem like some horrible people, do they not? And when they get into the land, they were continually trying to overthrow Israel. And what they did is they joined forces. Also the Sidonites, the Amalekites, and the Ammonites, they oppressed you. And these Canaanites, they would combine to strengthen their numbers so they could just continually attack Israel. And you cried out to me, and I delivered you from their hand. And they were such a nuisance, God says, look, at one point, I'm going to blot them out completely. Fast forward through the 400 years of the judges. Who's the first king of Israel for 2 bonus points in heaven? Anybody? Saul. I'm not sure you can all get the points. You know what God says to Saul is your first job? I want you to take out my revenge on the Amalekites. Look, they've attacked you. They've been a nuisance to you. They've tried to overthrow you. Your first job is to wipe them all out. Don't take their stuff, their livestock. Don't take them as slaves. Completely rid them. But Saul did not listen. Because after he attacked the Amalekites from Havilah, all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt, he took, who did he take? Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. So did Saul listen? No. He took the sheep as possessions. He left the king alive. Now, eventually, Samuel deals with the king, but what does it say that in verse 1 here, Haman is? He's the son of Hadassah, the Agagite. So he's a direct descendant of the king, and he's part of these people that have this 1,000-year feud with Israel. So take a step back. What did Mordecai just do in the end of chapter 2? He saves the king's life. Is he rewarded? No. Who gets promoted? Haman, the enemy of God's people, who, as we go through this, we're going to learn is one of the worst people ever. Why does God allow these people in our life? Why does he allow the meanest one to get the promotion? Why does he allow people to antagonize you and just get under your skin? And what we're going to see in Haman over the next few chapters is God allows this person to rise to power to show how much more powerful God is even over the worst people in our lives. So God doesn't always smite people with a mighty smite. Sometimes God allows this person to rise to power so he can show the light in you can burn much brighter than the evil in those other people. And we're going to get into that in a moment. So he had placed Haman, set him in a seat above all the princes who were with him. So the conflict comes in verse 2 when the king's servants who were within the king's gate, the lower level guys like Mordecai, they bowed and paid homage to Haman concerning him. But Mordecai, what would he do? He wouldn't bow or pay homage. Now, he's not bowing because he's being petty, because he thinks, hey, this promotion belongs to me. No, Mordecai wouldn't bow, not for physical reasons, but for spiritual reasons. He's not going to submit to the enemies of God in his life. Right? So, imagine the scene might look something like this when Haman walks through. All the other low-level employees are bowing, but Mordecai has a one-person revolution going on. Now, up until this point, Mordecai has told Esther, hey, don't tell anybody of your Jewish background. That's not a good idea. Let's keep that secret between us. So at this point, Esther's not speaking and Mordecai is not speaking on their background. But you have this peer pressure in verses 3 and 4. Why? Because all these guys are bowing down, and they realize Mordecai's not bowing down, and they're getting pressure from Haman, and they're saying, hey, you're going to go mess this up for all of us. You got to give us a reason why you're not bowing down. So Haman kind of puts the pressure on all the other low-level rulers there in the gate to say and go and find out what's going on with Mordecai. And you got the power of peer pressure. Peer pressure can be a powerful tool if used in the right way. Can we agree? Let me give you an example. This is a Christmas picture. I want to tell you a story about my family from December 18th. Now, we have a rule in our house. It's a very strong and fast rule that no kids are allowed in mom and dad's room. Your house might be different, but in our house, our room is completely off limits. If I need a moment to go get my breath, I want to be able to go in my room and not have 3 redheads follow me in. Can we nod our head? Because think about it. Kids will even follow you into the bathroom if they let you. No. I'm going to go in my room. You're going to give me a minute, and Dad's going to come out a little bit more under control. Can we nod our heads? So a week before Christmas, Charlotte was working on the stockings, and she got all this candy out on the bed, and she were making candy bags for the kids' stockings. And having 4 kids, you know what happens? You get interrupted. You don't always get your job done. So she left the things on the bed thinking, hey, kids are not allowed in here. Things are safe. We're going to go deal with the problem, and we're going to come back. You know what happened when she came back? All the Kit Kats were missing. Whole bag, 10 Kit Kats, gone. Boof. And of course, none of my angels could ever imagine something happening like that. And they couldn't believe that one of their siblings would go in and steal all the Kit Kats. Oh, we're not getting into that. That's not the point of the story. So Dad decided to use the power of peer pressure. Because let's be honest, it's a week before Christmas. There's a lot of things in the room around Christmas that they're not allowed to see, right? So I lined them all up in the kitchen, and I said, look, this is what happened, and it can't happen again. I said, I don't even care who took it. I'm not looking to name names, but it will not happen again. You will not go into my room. If you go into my room one more time, what do you think I told him? You think I'm mean enough to cancel Christmas? I thought about it, but here's the thing about canceling. I don't have to take all that stuff back. That's a lot of work. I don't have all those receipts still, and all that stuff is wrapped. I'm not doing that. No. What I told him is this. I said, look, if one of you go in the room again, we're going to delay Christmas 3 days. You're still going to get up early Christmas morning, and you can watch Mom and Dad open up all their gifts. You can watch us, and then we're going to go away to Grandma's house, and you can ask your cousins how their Christmas was when we go to Grandma's house. And then when we come back from Grandma's house, then we can talk about Christmas. Man, it got silent in here. Some of you are looking at me like I'm a horrible person. But guess what happened? They had a kids-only meeting in the basement. And I heard reports of, you're not going to go ahead and ruin my Christmas. If it was you better stay out of Mom and Dad's room. Right? So I didn't want to have to apply the pressure on them. I just created a situation where all the kids applied the pressure on each other. Right? By the way, what do you think was more effective? Me putting my thumb on them, or having all of them realizing you're going to, delay Christmas for everybody else? I mean, sometimes we talk about peer pressure like it's a little kid thing or a teen thing, but even as adults, the power of peer pressure can be effective, can it not? So, what happened to Mordecai? Every day Haman would go by. Every day Haman's standing up. Every day they're bowing down. And they're like, look, you're going to ruin this for all of us. You got to give us some kind of a reason why you're not bowing down. The fact that you don't feel like it or your knees aren't good, this is not going to fly. So Haman's like, look, we're going to put some peer pressure on them. And they finally got it out of Mordecai. And he says, I'm a Jew. I can't bow down to an Agagite. I mean, this is a feud 4 times longer than the Hatfield-McCoys. This is a 1,000-year feud. So, verse 5, he's filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. And the idea of disdain, it's like when he finds out that Mordecai is a Jew, his eyes are open, and now it's not good enough just to make an example out of Mordecai. Now he needs to make an example out of all of Mordecai's people, the Jews. And God's in control even with the worst people ever. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout all the kingdom of Artaxerxes. The people of Mordecai, what the Jews tried to do to his people, now he's going to be celebrated for carrying it out and doing it to the Jews themselves. And you got this crazy role reversal. So in Haman's anger, in the first month, which is Nisan, you know what? I'm going to convert this to America, right? So in January 12th, he's like, when are we going to do this? And they cast lots. And what would be the worst time to do this? We would say February and March. And every month you push it off is probably 1 month better. So when does God have the lot come down? In February or March or April? No. It fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So if it is January 12th, the lot fell on December 13th. And I always remember this because that's my birthday. So I'm like, hey, God, you're in control, right? Because it could have came the next month. But God pushes it as far away as possible. So in this, you see Haman's plan. So Haman said to the king, there is a certain people scattered. Now I threw up a map there of the kingdom of the Persians at this point. Chapter 1, it says there's 127 provinces. Again, it's over 3,000 miles. It is on 3 continents. There's a lot of people in this group, right? I mean, think of all the countries you could identify, all the way from Egypt to India. And now, in the midst of all of these countries, how many people groups do this represent? How many different tribes? How many different dialects? Hundreds, perhaps thousands. And here's a scattered group. They don't even have a land to call their own. At this point, this has been a people, the northern tribes, Israel, have been conquered for 300 years. And even the southern, Judah, have been conquered for perhaps up to 150 years. Look, to you, mighty king, these are nobodies. And he appeals to his pride. But you have the power to eliminate them. Man, you think narcissism is alive today? I mean, think about the narcissistic that you have the ability to wipe out a people from the face of the earth. And here is Haman convincing you of it. God's in control even with horrible people, is he not? You're going to see Haman rise up so the power of God's even that much greater. Therefore, let a decree, in verse 8, if it pleases the king that they be destroyed, I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do your work. Eventually, it'll get into your treasury. And there's two ways you can interpret this. For those of us who are bean counters and who are literal, you would say, well, if silver is $30 an ounce, this would be somewhere around $30 million. Anybody have $30 million in your back pocket? That's an unspeakable amount of money. I mean, think about it. If I had $30 million, I might put all $1 bills into the sanctuary and just swim through it. Could probably jump off of the balcony into my $1 bills and just do backstrokes. That's a crazy amount of money, is it not? There's a parable in the New Testament where Jesus talks about forgiveness. And the king brings one of his servants before him who owes him 10,000 talents. And if it's silver, we know it's 30 million. If it's gold, it's into the billions. But it's interesting that the same phrase is used. And as the king forgave that person, so the servant went and forgive someone who owes him a couple months' salary. And as God has forgiven us this incredible debt, so we should be able to forgive other people, even those who are the most miserable people in the world. However you interpret it, Haman pays a large ransom to the king to get this done. By the way, you know how rich people stay rich? You stay rich by spending other people's money. So he's like, hey, if you want to pay for it, we'll get her done. That's not in the New King James, if you're wondering. But he offers this decree. Pays the money. And the king gives him his ring, because we know two things about the king. One, he's a functional alcoholic. And second, that the servants of the king kind of lead him around. He's like, I don't want to do all the work. Here, I'll just give you the ring. You write it up the best way you see how. Put my ring on it. Boom, we'll make it law. And what's the law? It's this one-day purge. That on the 12th month and the 13th day, again, December 13th, for one night, we're going to have this night of complete lawlessness. And that you can target, you can get ready, you can plan out, you can target this specific people, and for one night and one night only, it is okay to do whatever you want to them. Kill mom, dad, the kids, and the dog if you like. And your reward for carrying out such a brazen attack is whatever or whomever you kill, you get to keep their stuff. Which is brilliant. Because it's not the king's soldiers and the king's army have to do this. I think he's thinking, hey, my Agite people, we've had this 1,000-year feud with the Jews. Man, if you just give the okay and turn a blind eye, I'm sure my people will rise up and do it for you. And if you give them a financial incentive, it makes it even that much more possible. So what you have is this one-day purge, this one night of complete lawlessness. And I use the word purge, and it might not mean something to you, but when you get home or you see your kids or your grandkids this week, ask them about the Purge movies. Because based on this idea, there's a hit TV show, there's already been 4 movies made, and coming out this summer is movie number 5. Around a society based that for one night each year, there's complete lawlessness, and you can kill whomever you want without consequence. It's crazy, isn't it? I think Esther is the most 2020 book we have. I mean, think about it. We're in chapter 3. Chapter 2, you have The Bachelor. That seems very 2020. You have Married at First Sight. And now in chapter 3, you have The Purge. All the things that are popular in today, some of you are like, wow, that's really, you get it. Some of you are like, I don't watch TV. Well, again, ask your grandkids. I often wonder how many untapped ideas are in the Bible, because it seems like Hollywood has ran out of ideas. I mean, there's some great TV shows in the Bible if you would just Read and study it. Anyway, we get back. Haman, worst person ever, organizes a one-day purge against God's people. So this decree is sent out throughout all of the Persian Empire. And there's two responses. Okay. Verse 15, the couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. The king and Haman, they sat down to drink. I wonder if this was 2020, Haman would have pulled out a victory cigar. They don't have a care in the world, do they? Haman just thinks he did his people a favor, and the king is like, well, another opportunity to drink, I'm there. But God's people, the Jews, they're perplexed. Goes out into the capital where you have this Jewish community, and they're crying out to God, how could God allow such a thing to happen to us? And it goes out to every people in their native tongue that they hear 11 months from now, it is okay, it is actually law to go out and kill these people and then take their stuff. Can we agree that this is perhaps the worst person ever? And yet God is in control. And yet God brings these people into our lives, do they not? Co-workers, fellow students. Sometimes you choose your spouse, but you don't choose the extended family, if you know what I'm saying, right? I mean, how many times you said, hey, honey, your in-laws are better than mine? Don't quote me on that one. Right? So how do we respond to these hard people in our life? I want to give you the words of Jesus as we close. Matthew chapter 5, if you want to turn there. Again, if you have the Pew Bible, it's 553. Again, if you have the Bible app, it's New King James. Starting in verse 43, you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Any more of an appropriate person to hate if you're a Jew than Haman? Might have just cause there. But Jesus says to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? Or the Hamans in your life do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. So tomorrow as you get up and you go to school or you go to work, and you got to see that miserable person once again. That person who it feels like their only goal in life, their only job is to make your life miserable, and they're good at their job, if you will. How should you treat that person? What does Jesus say? Look, if you talk behind their back, everybody's going to talk behind their back. If you're fake and you nod and then you make faces when they're not looking, all your coworkers are going to do that. If you're passive-aggressive, everybody's going to be passive-aggressive. What kind of light do you have in your workplace or in your school? Look, when someone's riding you hard, everybody sees it, do they not? And how do they expect you to respond? Just like the world responds. That if someone hates you, it's your right to hate them. But God is in control even when he puts hard and miserable people into your life. Why does God bring Haman into this story? Because ultimately, God's going to show that his power is far greater than Haman's power. And you're going to see the glory of God not just shine among the Jews, but shine throughout to the edges of the kingdom. So why does God bring miserable people in your life? Why are you called to bless them and pray for them and do good to them? Why? So that people might see that you are sons of the Father who are in heaven. And maybe your actions is going to lead someone who desperately needs Christ to a relationship with Christ. But maybe God is going to allow your light to shine, not just for their benefit, but for the benefit of everybody who's around. Right? Look, they will know we are Christians by the sermons we listen to. No, they will know we are Christians by our love. So how do you experience the power of God in your life? I mean, how many of you have prayed, God, your kingdom come, your will be done here on earth as it is in heaven, right? That the goal isn't just to get to heaven, but God, get a little bit of heaven in us. How do people see that? Everyone's going to be joyful when times are good. Everybody's going to be joyful when you get the promotion. Look, will people see the power of God in you when they know life is hard and the people around you are miserable? How many of you have ever had the miserable neighbor? So, we lived in Emmaus, Pennsylvania, for a year, we lived in a house just like this. We lived to the left, there was a common wall in the middle, and our neighbor lived that close to us to our right. By the way, loved it. Loved living in a community like that. Some of you look at me like I'm crazy. But the lady who lived to our right was a miserable person. We lived right across from the street. I was a youth pastor at the church. And every Wednesday night, she would call the police on our youth group. Without fail. They were harassing her. They were walking too close to her backyard. You give me an excuse, she would call. And every event we ran, she would call one of the other pastors, my boss, and have a list of things to complain about our teens. By the way, teens aren't always the smartest people in the world anyway, so like, but no, she was hard to live next to. And the kicker was she had this little yappy dog, not like this little dog, right? Who had this high-pitched bark, and it seemed like every time the baby would get to sleep, that dog would run and bark, or the mailman would come, and that dog had this uncanny ability of waking up our newborn daughter. So what do you do? By the way, the church for years we were praying that this person would move. But God didn't have her move yet. He had us show up. So that winter, with my snowblower, I decided I was going to snowblow her garage and her car without her asking. By the way, the garages were connected as well, so the garage wasn't a really crazy thing. And I was already snowblowing my car, so I decided to dig her car out. And God would have it that it didn't just snow once, it hasn't even snowed this winter, but it snowed twice a week for 2 straight months. Seriously, I must have snowblowed her at least 10 times. But she would continually, the first time she kind of yelled at me, and I'm like, okay, you want me to put it back? Then she thought about, no, you don't have to put it back. I'm like, okay, but God used that to thaw this relationship, right? And things began to change. Never forget that April, that little dog ran away. And in my heart, I wanted to scream in The Wizard of Oz, ding dong, the witch is dead, maybe I'll get my kid will sleep. There was that much temptation. I'll be honest, it was there. But the first person she knocked on my door, my dog ran away, and I'm thinking, so I get my shoes out, and for the next 3 hours we looked for little Scrappy, we'll call. Right? And God used me to restore the relationship. Right? Thankfully, 3 months later, she did move. But she wasn't bitter at the church anymore when she did, right? But I had to go through literally 9 months of come spring, she stopped calling the cops every week. And then come spring, she stopped always telling my boss how horrible our teens were. But maybe God has this missing person in your life because, look, they're miserable. They probably need Jesus, right? Who's the person God put in their life to share Jesus with them? You, right? And they're going to find out that you know and love Jesus because you're going to be miserable back. Is that going to work? No, they're not going to know you're Christians because the sermons you hear, they know you're Christians by your love, right? And maybe God puts this hard person in your life to show you, like in real life, how much more powerful God is than the person whose job it is to make you miserable. So, do you trust God's greater plan for your life? I mean, the Jews, all of a sudden, they're hearing 11 months from now, it is law to kill us and annihilate us. Right? But even with miserable people, God is still in control, and you're going to see the power of God play out with that. You know, even in your life, you're going to go through trials, you're going to go through hardships, right? For better or for worse. Nod your head if you've ever experienced a for worse. Anybody not nodding? Before communion, do you need to get your heart right with God? Because Jesus says that we should pray, that we should bless those people in our life who are miserable. And he uses the word miserable like persecute, right? And maybe God's trying to say, hey, look, knock, 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 knock. I'm trying to do something in your heart. Maybe it's not just the other person who needs a heart adjustment. I'm sure they do. Maybe you need a heart adjustment as well. And this is part of communion, right? Don't take communion in an unworthy manner. Examine yourself. And the way we're going to examine ourselves this morning, you know, is there something in your heart that you need to get right? I'm going to give you a moment of silence, and I want you to pray this to God. God, is there something you're trying to show me? God, right now, is there something you're trying to show me? Something you're trying to tell me? And if God speaks to you, trust that it's God. So if God puts a person in your mind, maybe that's God nudging you in that direction. If God is showing you, hey, you have this sin in your heart that I'd like to start dealing with, trust that is God working in your life. Right? So I'm going to give about 20 or 30 seconds. You can start praying. As I close in prayer, we'll have the musicians come forward, and we're still going to do communion this morning. So let's have a moment of silence. God, we want your heart here in this church. And we want to live out real faith. We want to not just hear, but we want to take action on what we've heard. So Lord, I pray that you're doing business all throughout this congregation right now. That you're speaking in a powerful but a unique way. God, that you're revealing sin. Lord, that you're giving us ideas of how to be more loving, how to be more generous. God, that we just wouldn't be people who know a great deal, but Father, we be people who experience you showing up in our life. Lord, that you sent your Son to give us life to the full, not knowledge to the full, but to give us life to the full. Lord, help us to align our hearts back with you. In whatever way you're speaking, Lord, allow us to live out and to do. Lord, give us the strength to deal with hard and miserable people in life, and to do so in a way that would honor your Son, Jesus. So it's in Christ we pray. Amen. Hey, we're going to stand and sing a verse of our closing hymn. I see 3 of the 4 men are up, so you can kind of join me over there, and then we'll have communion in a moment. So